Welcome to Early Adopter, the podcast where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Jess, marketing exec by day, AI experimenter by day, night, and basically every other waking moment in between at this point.
And I'm Kyle, your resident tech guru. I've spent the last decade building data systems, products, and AI tools that solve real-world problems. My goal is to cut through the noise and show you how this tech actually works for your business. Each week, we'll break down AI concepts, tools, or trends that actually matter for your business. We'll explain what it is, why you should care, and how to use it without needing a computer science degree.
So whether you're a small business owner, an entrepreneur, or you're just tech curious, grab your coffee, close that tab where you've been staring at ChatGPT for the past 3 weeks wondering what to do with it, and let's dive in. Just think of us as your guides through the wild, wonderful, and sometimes completely overwhelming world of AI.
This is Early Adopter.
Welcome to Early Adopter, the podcast where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Jess.
And I'm Kyle. Jess, how's your week been?
Well, it's been pretty good. I've been on the road a bit this week, which is why you've done the fair amount of the testing and things with everything this week. It's been a little tricky for me while I've been traveling, but no, I'm good, powering through my jet lag. I've been in. This is my third time zone in a week. So powering through with coffee, as we were just saying. I was drinking an awful lot of cold brew. So I was like,
I love that for you.
I know. Like, I'm not too jet lagged. And then I realized it was because I'd been mainlining cold brew for a week and it was basically rocket fuel. So
I'm so happy for you. I think that's perfect and exactly how you should be getting through all of this. So, I see nothing wrong with intense caffeine exposure.
It's going to give me the most intense withdrawal headaches when I get home and I'm not drinking as much. So that's not going to be fun. But right now, I'm powering through.
Good. I'm glad. Well, I've been catching up on my movies. I finally started, re-engaging. I mean, this comes from, for all of you listening, Jess and I worked in the movie industry. We used to see multiple movies a week. And yet, kind of in a post-COVID, post-entertainment industry world, I really haven't been watching a lot of movies. But this week, I got back on track. So I saw, in the last week, I've seen Superman finally, which was great. Yeah. Makes me actually excited for like the James Gunn DCU, even though I was a big Cavill Man of Steel fan. And then I caught up on Fantastic Four, which was also incredible.
I do really want to see that. I do want to see that.
Well, I do think you'll enjoy that one, so you should see it.
I will. I caught up on a lot of older movies while on the plane that I hadn't seen yet. So I saw a real wide range of content. I saw everything from Bridget Jones, her most recent Kids, I know, all the way through to Heretic, which is kind of diametrically opposite to Bridget Jones.
Yeah.
It was great, but
I don't do those scary movies.
I know you don't. And I used to not do them, but I've gotten more into them recently. And also, I just love Hugh Grant in his absolute villain era.
Yes.
His villain.
The Gentleman was incredible.
Oh my God. His villain in Paddington 2 is one of the funniest things I've seen. Like his final scene in Paddington 2, chef's kiss. It's perfect. Anyway,
I love it. Anyway, yeah. I spent the week trying to get ChatGPT's new AI agent to, work. I even tried to get it to book a flight for me, right?
Did you end up somewhere exotic or?
That would have been nice. No, I ended up just watching a 20-minute virtual machine mock-up of Google searches, followed up by instructions on how to go visit United.com and book it myself.
Wow. So it's an AI travel agent that doesn't actually book travel.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit. But my high level, we test the AI tools so you don't have to. And sometimes in this case, that's probably right what you need to hear.
Yeah, we sometimes you have to sift the wheat from the chaff. Like you gotta try these things. And there are a lot of tools out there that are not great. So, that is what we are here to help our listeners do is get through the shit.
Absolutely.
So as Kyle just said, today we're going to be deep diving into OpenAI's new ChatGPT Agent feature that dropped a couple weeks ago. And Kyle, let's get your feedback on it.
Yeah, and let me tell you up front, I think this is both exciting and equal parts frustrating. You know, to use an analogy, it's like watching a toddler try to use chopsticks. You know, you can see where it's headed, but right now it's mostly dropping things. And I want to be cautious because, I think to a certain extent, the bar is getting raised. So our expectations continue to grow and evolve. And so to a certain extent, if they had released this version of ChatGPT Agent a year ago or 2 years ago, maybe even 6 months ago, we would have been probably very impressed. But the bar has moved and continues to move. And so I feel like this is maybe just a little underwhelming relative to where we are today.
That's really interesting. Um, so before we get into what went wrong, I think it's worth reminding everyone what an AI agent is, because we've covered this before in previous episodes, but it's a couple weeks ago. And, I know some people haven't listened to every episode. I mean, how dare you, but also we will on your behalf. So let's remind
Yes.
us ourselves what agents are.
So an AI agent is basically an AI that can take actions on your behalf. So not just answer questions, but actually start to accomplish a task. Think of it as the difference between asking someone for directions versus having them actually drive you there.
Yeah. And so for anyone who missed it, I think it's worth recapping what we're calling the ladder of autonomy, because understanding where ChatGPT's agent fits into this ladder is actually really important for understanding and for setting realistic expectations as to what it can actually do for you.
Absolutely. We've talked about this framework before. At the bottom rung, you have basic workflows and automations, just if this, then that. And this doesn't have any intelligence. And we've had that for a long time. A lot of you use that in your systems today. Think of things like automatically sending a tracking number when someone places an order, or someone hits your website and instantly responding with a baked, templated email.
Yeah. And then the next rung is their task agents. So these can handle single tasks with some intelligence. So rather than just sending like a tracking number, as you would with the first rung, the agent might read the customer email, understand what the subject of the email is. So let's say they're talking about shipping, and then respond with the relevant tracking info plus delivery estimate. So it just adds a little bit of a layer of intelligence onto that, but it's not like taking decisions. It's still very much like following a prescribed path.
Yeah. And rung 3 is where it starts to get interesting. Goal-seeking agents. These can handle multi-step processes and make decisions within boundaries that you set, like a customer service agent that reads a complaint, then checks the customer or user's history, understands your policies, and then decides whether to issue a refund, offer store credit, or escalate to a human to kind of take on the additional kind of communication.
And then at the top, which is rung 4, is agentic AI. That's a real buzzword at the minute. And that's where the system starts to set its own goal and make strategic decisions. So it might, notice a pattern in refund requests and proactively suggest changes to a return policy. Most people might refer to something as agentic AI, but it's not really agentic, like fully agentic. It's not making decisions for itself. And honestly, that's where you need a lot of guardrails and guidelines. Etc. But a lot of people will say that their tool is agentic. It's not really agentic yet.
Yeah. And, as we've talked about, maybe we're not ready for that quite yet. And ChatGPT's agents, this AI agent feature is supposed to be somewhere between rungs 2 and 3, between task and a goal agent. So the agent can take actions across multiple applications, make some decisions, but still kind of within the boundaries you set. And the promise is that it could do something like schedule a meeting with X, Y, and Z person about this topic, marketing budget or my financial analysis. And actually go into your calendar, find available times, send out the correspondence to coordinate that meeting, and then book the meeting is how it's built.
So it sounds amazing in theory, but as we're about to get into, the reality is, just a little more complicated than that. And I should also say, if you want to know more about agents and some use cases and examples, we did that episode 6 and 7. So a couple of weeks ago, just, go into your podcast player and you can listen to our deep dive into agents where we go much, much, much more in depth on all of that.
Yeah. And I think the hope when we wanted to cover this feature, I think the hope was that it was going to make AI agents a lot more accessible. When we talked about it before, some of what the feedback we got was that it wasn't quite accessible. People didn't know how to put it into practice. So I was really hoping that this feature would enable, our audience to start to experiment, play around with that. And I think that is true. I think you can start to experiment, and I think that's going to be one of our takeaways. But I would say set your expectations low. Don't be thinking this is going to solve like some huge part of your business and automate away something, a whole person. We'll get into our intern analogy, but I'm not even sure this quite qualifies as an intern. Maybe as like that summer intern who's just coming in for 2 weeks and you kind of give it some really basic stuff.
Wow, damning with faint praise.
Yeah. So look, so getting into what the feature actually is, OpenAI's agent is actually an evolution of two features they had before. Do you remember we covered the deep research from a few episodes back?
Yeah, so that was the one that could read like hundreds of web pages and write really, really detailed reports and just kind of give you much more background research than it had initially been able to do.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And they also had this thing called Operator, which was in beta that could click around websites like a human. And the new agent that they've released basically smashes these two together. So it can research and it can take actions on like the public internet.
So in theory, it would look up the flight options, so use the research element to find all of those flight options. And then the operator side
Mm-hmm.
would be that it would actually book them for you. So that's like what it should, or what we would hope that it would be able to do.
Yeah. So in theory, yes. And it's been built that way. And it might get there with some caveats. But what it does is it has this virtual computer with two browsers. So a visual one that can click buttons and fill forms, and then a text-based one for quickly reading content. And then it can run code and generate files. And then using integrations, you can connect it to your email and your calendar and some other kind of off-the-shelf tools that you use every day.
So it sounds like it has a lot of potential. Like it sounds like it could be incredibly powerful. So what's the catch? Where did you find that it didn't work for you?
Where do I start? So I mean, look, I wouldn't say that it accomplished any of the tasks I set it. I think it builds upon that deep research agent that we talked about, and it's a potential little small step improvement to that, but it's, again, not a fully automated system. So I tested it with what I thought would be very simple tasks. So first I asked it to do competitive market research and then build me an actual slide PowerPoint deck comparing competitors, market analysis, basically like create me a pitch deck for anyone who's, familiar with those.
I mean, that seems pretty straightforward for something that's supposed to be really advanced. Like this is exactly what they keep billing themselves as being able to do.
Yeah, and you would think so. But what actually happened is after I asked it to research competitors, and again, the example I used was my cold brew coffee. I'm like, hey, why don't you research cold brew market and then build me a pitch deck to go pitch investors for an early stage investment? And I even gave it some examples like, okay, this is how I would want it to be. This is what I want it to look like. This is the format I want it in, how long I want the content to be. So I kind of tried to give it our prompting framework, right? You are this, so roll. I gave it context and then I gave it examples. But it didn't really work out that well.
So what went wrong?
Well, first off, watching it work was painful. So it kind of builds that little virtual machine in ChatGPT Agent, which is very cool visually. Like credit where credit's due. That looks great. But when it tried to visit competitor websites or some websites on the internet, it was getting blocked often. So obviously there's a tool on a lot of pages called Cloudflare, which, protects those pages from like bot and automation activity. So this was basically doing the same thing and identifying that it was an agent and blocking it left and right.
It's essentially like like if you've ever tried to read an article and you get blocked because you have to pay.
Mm-hmm. Or if you've ever gotten that page that says, suspicious activity, you clicked on this thing too long and it looks for you to do the CAPTCHA. Well, I started pinballing between those websites and it wasn't able to get past that automation. So it wasn't actually acting like a human, it was kind of acting like a bot, and sites were picking that up.
That's actually a real problem, and I think it's going to become increasingly common as well as more
Mm-hmm.
websites kind of protect themselves against AI or bot
Mm-hmm.
activity. So that it's going to be increasingly an issue, and there will be like partnerships that will allow this to be
Mm-hmm.
bypassed, but definitely not yet.
Yeah. So it felt basic, just like using deep research, but with extra steps and slower, unfortunately. It was maybe slightly more complex in its analysis. Where it was going and its reasoning capabilities between steps of research looked to be a little bit more sophisticated. But the output was just more text, more bullet points, more copy. I didn't actually get any slides.
Oh, so even though you actually specifically asked for a slide deck and gave it examples, you didn't actually get the
Yeah.
slide. Interesting.
Yeah, even though I gave it the examples of what I wanted, and it gave me a really good outline. And the outline was great. And I would say if I wanted to go build a pitch deck, that would be a good pitch deck to go create. But I wanted it to make the pitch deck or to start it, give me like a visual aid.
Yeah. So I guess the equivalent is like you wanted it to make you dinner, but it actually just handed you the recipe and still expected you to go away and do it, which is kind of the opposite of
Mm-hmm.
what you actually wanted.
Yeah, and this pattern kind of kept repeating itself as I asked it more things, and we'll get into some more use cases. But the use case that I talk about all the time is how do we fix email? And at the end of the day, I decided not to actually connect my email. I think we're going to cover a lot of privacy issues and stories with ChatGPT coming up. And while I've felt comfortable connecting Claude to my email and my calendar, I actually stopped and I decided not to connect OpenAI for a lot of the reasons and limitations we talk about. I just don't feel like having it give it full reign to my email is a good idea. We've talked about how I've built agents using like N8N and other platforms to summarize, draft emails, and then I run it through OpenAI with a very clear prompt, and then I get an output that I can do something with. You need to have that oversight, and you shouldn't go towards the full just read everything, start creating drafts, and potentially sending emails. Based on my kind of limited exposure with it so far, I don't feel like it's quite ready to just give it free reign.
I think that's probably a pretty smart move on your behalf.
Yeah. And look, I did give it a couple emails in a small condensed setting, and they were fine, but I wouldn't have wanted to send any of those drafts without editing anyway. So it didn't even quite capture a lot of my personal style. So I don't think it has the memory context when it is in the ChatGPT agent side. So again, it's missing some of those building blocks that I think have gotten us to the point where we go, oh, ChatGPT is great. It sounds just like me. It doesn't have that quite yet.
So it's not exactly the personalized assistant that you were promised. But what about
Mm-hmm.
that flight booking example? Because I personally hate booking flights and hate booking hotels. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. So anything that could do that on my behalf, I'd be over the moon about. But how did you get on with it?
Yeah, and I see real promise for this. I agree with you. This could be incredible to coordinate your travel with friends and book flights, book hotels, and kind of get everything ready and build your itinerary. But I will say, when I tried to book this flight, this was probably the most frustrating 20 minutes of my week. I asked it to book a flight for an upcoming trip to New York, which very simple task, right? And it fires up a visual browser. It shows me it's researching flights, puts up the little virtual machine, and I see like all of these Google flights, right? And as I'm watching this thing work, and it's really only using Google Flights. It's not checking airline sites. It's not looking at aggregators. It's just basically searching Google. And here's the kicker. I watched it do this for like 15 or 20 minutes, like constantly iterating through different Google flight options. I could have done the same search in literally 30 seconds.
So it took 20 minutes to do what you could have done in 30 seconds.
Absolutely. I mean, I literally sat there for 20 minutes only because of the pod. I was doing it for the pod. After all of that theatricality, at the end of the day, it just ended up giving me step by step instructions of how to go book it myself. Go to united.com, click on book flight, enter your departure city, right? I mean, nothing in there was actually booking anything.
So it basically just wrote you a WikiHow article on how to book a flight, like something that you've been doing for 30 plus years.
Basically, yeah. Only benefit of it was that it gave me like I think it gave me 4 flight options based on the data and the context I had given it, which again, I could have reasoned through really quickly. So, and the other thing too is as it's looking through the Google Sites, it wasn't really accounting for availability either, right? I'm a little dubious on whether or not those flights are available or how many seats are available. I have no information. It didn't actually go into the booking to see like which seats were available or anything like that. So this kind of promise of it using the browser to act like a human and really go through the process also kind of fell short.
Well, because that's like what an aggregator would do. Like if you go to Expedia or whatever, they're connected into those systems, so they know how many seats
Mm-hmm.
left. So like that's the benefit of using those aggregators.
Yeah. And so it wasn't connected to any actual booking systems, you know? I mean, I gave up pretty quickly on that one.
Okay, so I mean that's quite a complicated task. So I can understand it may have struggled a little bit with that. But what about a simpler task? What else did you give it to try?
Yeah, I thought let's try something a little more straightforward. And a lot of the documentation talks about how it's really good on government websites. Why that's the case, I don't know. But then again, I'm like, actually, booking a DMV appointment, super frustrating. So if it can handle that and iterate through, maybe that'd be great. And it started pretty well. It opened up the real DMV website, went to the specific location that I asked it for, navigated through the pages. As it was navigating through the different time slots and figuring out what was available, it was kind of annotating itself, telling me what. So as I watched it, it was almost like it was kind of having a conversation. So again, the UI of it was actually quite good and useful. But because it's annotating and going through, it's also very slow.
Yeah.
But then it hit the calendar interface and it just kind of got stuck. So as it's iterating through every single available date and time slot, you know, it would like click on Monday, check times, click on Tuesday, check times, right? It just got very slow and it just got hung up through that loop. When we talk about like our ladders of autonomy here, if I'm trying to get to an objective, I don't really care about that. Find what I need, move on to the objective that I'm trying to find. Whereas this was very more on the task side of like, just check all the times and see if there's availability, right? It didn't really have that objective or goal in mind.
So did it actually find you a good time? Like, did you end up booking the appointment through the agent?
No, after about 15 minutes, I realized it wasn't going to actually finish. I just kept going through each one and I lost patience.
But I mean, I would as well, because the point of using something like that is so you don't have to do it yourself. So what's the point of it?
Yeah, and I think the visual experience that they tried to accomplish, where they show you the browser and show you working, has a purpose. But and it's kind of interesting to see what's happening underneath, you know, underneath all of it. But ultimately, I just want the task to get accomplished and quickly. The reason that I think they did that is because it may come up to points where you have to click something and then, you know, they want you kind of involved in that process if it gets hung up at a point. But that didn't actually come up for me. There wasn't somewhere that I got stuck and I needed to click on it. So it was pretty useless.
So it's basically just slow at thinking, it's slow at clicking, it's just slow in general, which is the opposite of what you want to use it for.
Yep. I will say one interesting thing is you can run multiple agents at a time. So because it spins up its own virtual machine in the background, they run in the background like deep research does. So theoretically, you could have one researching flights, another one working on that DMV appointment, another one drafting emails, another one creating analysis. You have no limitation. Sometimes when you're having a conversation with ChatGPT, you're kind of focused and stuck building through all of this. You can kind of set it and forget it on a lot of different tasks and have it kind of go out into the world without you.
So I can see how that is a positive, like that would be great to have, but at this point it just sounds like just a bunch of slow, confused interns needing you to step in and fix things anyway. So basically this just sounds more like it sounds less like a productivity tool, which is what it's supposed to be, and more like a productivity trap. It feels like one of those things where you just end up sitting in front of the computer for ages just watching it try and do something. But so like how does it actually compare to like an e-commerce site?
Yeah, and I did quite a bit of research on what other people's user experience, because I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just me and user error. So I looked at a lot of Reddit user posts and did quite a bit of research. And people testing it on actual e-commerce sites like Amazon, Best Buy, Walmart, it just couldn't access those, right? So there was just a lot of error pages everywhere.
So it can actually shop on some of the biggest sites on the internet. I mean, right now, that doesn't really surprise me. It's, some of the like the firewall stuff that we were just talking about.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Cloudflare, I think, protects like 20% of the internet, and it's actively blocking these agents. So it's going to have issues with those websites.
interesting. That kind of makes sense when you think about it. Like most sites want AI to read and talk about their content because that's really good for
Hmm.
SEO and for discoverability and things like that. But actually letting AI control the user flow is
Hmm.
pretty different. You kind of lose the entire user journey. You lose, this is stuff that I on the marketing side of things deal with all the time.
Hmm.
You lose the ad impressions, you lose, all that stuff that's going to monetize the site or help from the marketing side.
Yeah, and if we think about it, I used Google Flights to do the research through the agent, and it could do that part fine. But when it tried to actually book through United or Delta's websites, it was blocked. These travel sites have spent millions upon millions optimizing booking flows and perfecting that user journey. They don't want AI to bypass all of that, even though, quite frankly, I think from a user experience, it would be a lot better.
Yeah, so it's not a technical limitation. It's more of a business model conflict. Like we don't need to get into the whole walled garden conversation. We probably should talk about that at some point, but that's
Hmm.
much more of like a marketing conversation. But there are intentional reasons why websites often don't play nicely together because it's all about keeping the data within that
Hmm.
website's own walled garden. And so it makes sense that they don't want the AI coming in and kind of taking over that process because it then and there's data privacy issues involved, etc. But like then once that walled garden is breached, then they lose that data,
Yeah.
which for them is the really valuable thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And look, there are some use cases where this is useful, and I think those use cases will grow. So there was a person who wanted to find contact info for tutors and then draft personalized outreach emails. That's a great use case for an agent. They used it for, to basically find tutors, reach out to them, and kind of do all of this pretty, quickly and easily. Another person used it for brainstorming and connecting to their GitHub repo for development work. Now, personally, I would be very cautious around that, but people are starting to try all these things out and get decent results.
Also, we should say that for anyone who isn't aware, a GitHub
Mm.
repository is where all of your code lives. So
Hmm.
that is where you put your code to keep it safe so that you don't lose it. So giving OpenAI or an agent access to it means that you're essentially giving it access to the entire building block of your website or your app or
Hmm.
whatever built with it. So it can get a little iffy. So
Yeah, and
so
remember, we know that ChatGPT then saves that for its training data, so you're basically
well,
giving someone your
yeah.
app.
Exactly. So basically, if we kind of boil it down to everything that you've talked about, it's pretty good for research and for drafting content, but not actual actions. That's kind of where it falls down.
Yeah, pretty much. And I think the thing that really gets me is the speed. That was pretty frustrating. It's quite
Mhm.
slow. So OpenAI's own examples show it taking 5 minutes to plan a date night or 25 minutes to create a slide deck that analyzes earnings.
I mean, 25 minutes is crazy because I could do that in 25 minutes. Like the point of it is that it speeds things up. 25
Yeah.
minutes is way too long.
And yet, one OpenAI researcher that was talking about this said ordering cupcakes took almost an hour. So, sure, it saves it from you doing it yourself. And I guess it's technically happening in the background. But an hour, I could drive to the bakery, order, and back, and probably save myself time.
Oh, 1000%. That's crazy. But so you also said that it could browse the web and it could log into sites with credentials, right? Like that seems like it has potential.
That's what it advertises. Again, that's how it's built. But another fun discovery, I tried to use it to research latest funding rounds on Crunchbase, which would require me to log in with my pro account, pull the data, and then make a nice CSV, which again, sounds like a great use case for an agent, but it flat out refused. So it said, even with my credentials sitting there, it gave me this spiel about how it can't accept usernames and passwords, won't impersonate users, can't submit forms, only would take me down a path of using like APIs.
That's like the whole point of an agent, though, isn't it? Is that it's supposed to act on your behalf. And I get what they're trying to do with it. They want to make sure that there's guardrails implemented so that it doesn't just go off and impersonate a user.
Mhm.
But that also seems like a fairly fundamental like
Yeah.
issue.
I mean, I think you're right. From a security standpoint, it's probably the right call. But what that means is that the agent can only browse public websites, click around on non-authenticated pages, maybe use some APIs, but it definitely means no logging into your LinkedIn, no accessing your Gmail directly unless you've done the integration. Definitely don't say you should do this, but definitely no bank accounts. But anything that has that kind of like that login wall, which is most sites, and I believe most sites are going that way because you want to protect your data, it's going to get stopped at.
So essentially, when they say that it can browse the web, they really mean it can browse part of the web.
Yeah, exactly. It can browse the public web. So Wikipedia, again, government websites. Why government websites? I'm not sure. Blogs, anything that doesn't require a login, and also any large sites that aren't trying to control the user journey, like we talked about, that isn't actively trying to block you. But the moment you need authentication, or the moment you need to kind of delve kind of past that initial layer of the internet, you're going to be out of luck.
But that's a major, major limitation. Like, this is the whole reason why people want to use it, is to allow them to not have to do the things that require authentication and, whatever the case may be. So this isn't ideal.
No, and maybe this improves over time, but for right now, when you take into account Cloudflare blocking it, major e-commerce sites rejecting it, and then not being able to log into the services where you have legitimate access, we're basically left with an agent that can only interact with the simplest, most open parts of the internet. And like you said, is just very limiting.
Interesting. So, what's the Reddit consensus? Because Reddit is, for its faults, Reddit is a great place to kind of get public opinion, and because they definitely will tell you the unvarnished truth.
And while there were a lot of great use cases, that some of which we identified, for the most part, I would say it probably leaned towards negative. And in the cases where there were some people who really didn't hold back in their scathing reviews.
I never do on Reddit.
The general sentiment is that it's great for low complexity tasks, filling simple forms, doing Wikipedia research, brainstorming, kind of just that slight step up above deep research. But for anything involving real commercial websites or complex interactions, it's going to fall flat.
Do we think that this is going to get worse? Like, are we going to find that more sites are blocking agents?
Almost certainly. That's my prediction. If I think about this from a business perspective, if I'm Amazon and I spent decades perfecting my recommendation engine, my checkout flow, trying to upsell, other things. I mean, that's a big part of what Amazon does, is you buy one thing and then upsells you additional things. Why would you let an AI agent bypass all of that and just buy stuff directly? You're losing a lot of what makes you really sticky and what makes you purchase more.
Not to mention, Amazon have their own AI agent that they want to prioritize and make sure that you're using, because it will do all of those things, like the upsell, kind of built into the flow. Because it's essentially like going into IKEA and not walking through and seeing all those little things that you can grab, and just going straight into the warehouse part of IKEA where everything's in boxes, and you just grab that one specific thing rather than picking up all the crap that you don't necessarily need, but you get to buy because it looks good in the displays.
That's a great example. And I think about the user experience of IKEA. You sometimes kind of need to see it displayed and need to see the things around it. Yeah, there's totally a reason for that. There's whole industries around UX and product design people that have really fine-tuned what these things are. Travel sites make money from the extras and the upgrades, upselling you to first class. But the entire web economy, premium economy. But the entire web economy is built on user journeys, right? Not agent transactions. So we have a real kind of friction that is starting to come up because of these AI agents.
Were there any really specific examples that you found that stood out on Reddit?
Yeah, there was a brutal one. Someone asked it to copy documentation into an HTML file. So the ChatGPT agent browsed all the pages, showed the progress and the annotations, acted like it was working. just like with my DMV example or with my booking page. But then it returned just a tiny getting started snippet. And so it completely missed 90% of the content.
And basically, what you're saying is that it's really good at research, but it's not great at the execution. But are
Mm-hmm.
there any tasks that it's actually good at? Because it sounds like we've done a lot of negatives here.
Yeah, and I don't mean to pile on. So there are some good use cases for this. It can analyze competitor pricing if the data is publicly available. So if a competitor has pricing pages, it can do a lot of that research. It's really good at summarizing terms and conditions. So like decoding a loyalty program rules, which no one looks at terms and conditions. So that's a great place for it to really, dig into that for you. And surprisingly, it is decent at creating slide decks from data you give it, at least in terms of the actual content piece. I still haven't gotten it to actually build a PowerPoint for me.
So basically, if a task involves reading public information and reformatting it, it's useful. But if it actually involves doing anything, then it's still
Yeah,
quite, uh, yeah.
you're on your own, right? And I think going back to our intern analogy, I think it's a very eager intern, right? It's helpful, it's energetic, it wants to look at a bunch of different sites, even if it gets blocked from doing it. But occasionally, it's going to get lost. If it doesn't have clear objectives, it's going to miss the point, and you probably have to babysit it a little bit more than you would expect.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing is like it's just not living up to its billing essentially. But
Mm-hmm.
let's talk some of the practical limitations. Like what should our audience be aware about for ChatGPT agent in general?
Yep. So first, cost and limits. Pro users get 400 agent tasks per month. That's that $200 per month subscription. That's quite a lot. I think probably most people are on the plus plan. So plus users get 40 of these agents for $20. Secondly, the limitation is you need to babysit it. So for anything involving purchases or sensitive data, it forces you into this watch mode where you're supposed to be supervising every click. But and then at the same time, it really can't go beyond a lot of these login screens. So that still counts though against your one agent. So even if it fails, it goes against kind of that usage limitation that you have. So it's kind of defeating the purpose a little bit here. I'd like to see some of that model shift where it should be outcome based. So as long as it successfully completes the task, then it would go against your usage. And here's the kicker for this thing. It's not even available everywhere yet. So users in the EU can't access it due to regulations. And the ChatGPT enterprise users are still waiting for it to get rolled out to them. Probably because they're testing it on us unsuspecting plus users and trying to get feedback and figure out how it works before they go prime time.
I think that's exactly what happens. So if someone does decide to go ahead and use this, can you give our listeners a little bit of a framework to at least give them some guidance if they do decide to give it a try themselves?
Yeah, here's my decision framework on when to use it based on my examples. So use the agent if your task involves only public data, or you need research synthesis or summary, like the deep research agent. Time isn't critical and you're willing to wait 20 to 30 minutes or you're doing other tasks in the background, that's fine. You're not overly concerned with accuracy, which feels suspect, but if you're looking for something that's 70 to 80% accurate and you're just trying to get like maybe a directional view, I think it's good. And then if you're willing to review and edit the output, I would definitely not recommend that you copy paste everything it provides for you. We would typically say that, but I definitely feel at this stage you shouldn't do that. You should skip the agent if the task that you're trying to build requires any logins or authentication. This may change in the future because it is billed as being able to do that, but I was unable to get that to work due to the AI policy. It told me it could not do it. You need actual transactions completed. Definitely don't get it involved in transactions. Don't do this if it's time sensitive. So if you're trying to get something done right away or you have limited time, you're going to abandon it and get very frustrated. If accuracy, like 100%, 95% accuracy is critical, that's not going to really work very well. And definitely don't involve this with sensitive or proprietary data. It's why I didn't connect my email to it. I'm just not comfortable with the system yet to do that.
What about the business implications?
Yep, very important. So if you're thinking about using this for your business, I would consider the risks. What if an employee uses it to research competitors and it includes incorrect data in a client presentation because you went straight through the funnel and got the deck and copy pasted it in? Or what if it drafts customer emails that are just off? So I think there are real compliance and reputation risks here involved.
So it's not really ready for prime time, right? It's not quite there yet. But where do we think it could go? Because I do feel like it's very early days for it. It feels like we're seeing version 1 of something that could potentially be massive.
Yeah, absolutely. Go back to how we talked about agents in episode 6 and 7. When this thing properly is going to work and it can reliably interact with any website, when it has your communication style and can handle complex multi-step workflows, that'll be really transformative.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the pros and the cons of the ChatGPT agent. Like in general, what's your final impression? If you could sum it up in one sentence, what would you say about it?
Yeah, this ChatGPT agent feature is like seeing the first iPhone, but knowing that the iPhone 15 is coming. So that first one is clunky, it's limited, it's frustrating, it takes a long time, but it's also a glimpse of how we'll all be working in a few years. So don't dismiss it, but also don't depend on it, I would say, yet.
Okay, so let's dive into some AI news that actually matters for our audience. And this week, it kind of refers back to some of your concerns around why you didn't connect your agent to ChatGPT. So let's get into this.
Yeah, it's very topical for what we're doing. The first story is out of YouTube. They just announced the US rollout of an AI-powered age estimation system that can detect teen users, even if they lie about their age when signing up.
So what's actually happening here is that YouTube's AI analyzes behavioral patterns like search queries and viewing habits to estimate users' real age, regardless of what their birthday says when they sign up for their account.
And this rollout comes in response to pressure from lawmakers and child safety advocates. So social platforms, including YouTube, are under a lot of scrutiny for how they impact teen mental health, from algorithm-driven rabbit holes to exposing minors to inappropriate content.
I mean, Australia has just put in like a blanket ban on social media for under 16s, and YouTube actually had an exemption, but I believe that exemption has now just been revoked. So this is, going to be even more important. And from a technical perspective, this is quite sophisticated. The AI isn't just looking at what someone says their age is, it's looking at behavioral patterns that correlate with different age groups. So, if someone creates an account claiming to be 25, but their viewing patterns match those of a 15-year-old, then the system is going to flag them as likely underage. And remember, YouTube's been around for 20 years at this point. It's got a lot of historical data, and a lot of these younger audiences have been using and watching YouTube content since they were very young. So it's going to have a lot of historical data. So even if you say you're 25, it could say, well, you've only been on YouTube for X number of years, or you were watching kids content 5 years ago.
I'd be very curious to see what my age is that it thinks I would be. And look, this is a real problem, right? We know that these rabbit holes are an issue. We know that the youth are struggling with kind of this social media world. A lot of studies around that. So there are some clear benefits here. YouTube says it will help apply content restrictions. This will eventually allow it to limit data collection from minors. Although I'm a little dubious on that statement because, you need a lot of data to really understand it. But ultimately, this does improve safety. So it would, some of the ways that it does that is disabling autoplay, restricting ads, and then limiting certain social features on the site.
I mean, there is absolutely no doubt that this is a real problem, and it's something that YouTube's been grappling with for quite a long time. And so something absolutely needs to be done. I just don't know if this is the answer. I mean, we know that teens lie about their age to access restricted features. Like that's been going on for a million years.
Yeah.
Look, that's why kids had fake IDs, right? So they could get into a bar. Like
Great
None of
example.
this is new. It's just the digital version of it. But
Mhm.
we know because we know that they're trying to access restricted features. So relying on self-reported birthdays just isn't going to be effective. And I think that there is an acknowledgement of that.
Mhm. But there are some serious concerns here too. Obviously, there's the privacy aspect. This system requires analyzing detailed behavioral data. Like, think of everything you watch, it's analyzing. And then essentially, what that means is that they're profiling all of their users, including the minors.
Yeah, and there's a major accuracy question as well. Like, what happens if the AI gets it wrong? Like, it can very easily
We
misidentify.
talk about that all the time, right? That's our
Absolutely.
favorite segment.
And also, not everyone behaves in the same way. There's obviously outliers. Not all teenagers are going to be watching the same
Yep.
content. Or if it misidentifies an adult as a teen, then they're going to lose access to certain content or features. You know, and it's not easy to appeal these sorts of things. And then if it misidentifies a teen as an adult, then the whole system breaks down. That defeats the point of
Yeah.
all of this. And as we again have talked about endlessly, no AI system is 100% accurate at this point, and the consequences of errors in this sort of situation could actually be really significant.
Mhm. I have a prediction. I think we can safely say that this is going to end up on our AI gone wrong segment down the line.
I think that you are accurate in that prediction.
That's right. But there's also the broader question. So, are we normalizing behavioral surveillance in the name of safety? There's always that trade off between privacy and safety. So, today it's age detection, but what will we infer next?
And like it's a case study in AI trade-offs, right? Like YouTube has good intentions here. The safety issue is a real concern. Like no one is questioning that, but they're making predictive assumptions, as you say. They're doing behavioral analysis, all of that stuff about people based on patterns, not fact. And people don't behave in patterns.
Mhm.
People are people. They change their mind. They do different things. They
Mhm.
don't, they're not agents. They don't follow specific set courses, no matter what you might think about it. So, for our audience, I think this story highlights several really important issues about AI deployment. So,
Mhm.
first of all, even really well intentioned AI systems can have unintended consequences. And second, when you're using AI to make decisions about people, accuracy and bias are really, really important things to be aware of. We talked about it with women, we talked about it with race. The bias in AI really does
Mhm.
have long-term effects. And I think the practical takeaway for our audience of business owners and entrepreneurs and founders is that if you're considering any AI system like this that analyzes user behavior or makes predictions about people, and there are a lot out there, especially in marketing segmentation and things like that, you need to
Mhm.
think really carefully about that accuracy and the bias and the privacy and the unintended consequences.
Now, our second story this week comes from Microsoft, and it's one that I think is going to hit close to home for all of our listeners. Microsoft just released an internal list of jobs that they believe will be replaced by AI. And it's not just the obvious candidates either.
This is really significant because it's coming from one of the companies that is building a lot of the AI technologies that we're talking about. So when Microsoft
Mhm.
talks about which jobs AI is going to replace, they're kind of talking from a position of like really understanding and knowing what that technology is capable of.
And what's particularly interesting is that the list isn't blue collar or entry level positions. It includes roles like market research analysts, tax preparers, financial analysts, writers, and translators, which kind of makes a lot of sense. But
Mm.
these are knowledge workers, right? When we think of the Industrial Revolution and other, technology advancements, traditionally knowledge workers were considered safe from automation, and that's not the case with this revolution.
What's important to understand here is that, and this ties back to our conversation with Sean around proficiency before efficiency. Microsoft isn't
Mhm.
saying that these jobs are going to disappear overnight. They're definitely not. But they're saying that these roles are going to be fundamentally transformed by AI, which is a really different thing.
This definitely aligns with what we've been saying about AI being a multiplier rather than a replacement. These are jobs where AI can do a lot of the heavy lifting, data analysis, repetitive tasks. Okay, ChatGPT agent aside, where it's not quite ready yet, but it's going to get there. And this will free up people for strategy, relationship building, and creativity. That relationship building piece has always been important. It's going to become so much more important in the future.
I think it's really important to flag what's not on the list as well. So, roles that require complex human judgment, emotional intelligence, creative problem solving, like those are largely absent. Those are things that very much need that human input. So,
Mhm.
while a financial analyst might see the number crunching automated, they're still going to be needed for interpreting those numbers in a specific business context with their 10 plus years of experience and then making the strategic recommendations because the AI still can't quite do
Yeah.
that.
Which is music to my ears because as a data person, I don't want to keep crunching numbers, right? And if you're a business leader, this list should not prompt layoffs. That's the wrong way to interpret this. It should spark planning. So, how do you upskill your team? How do you redeploy talent toward higher leverage activities? How do you build more human interactivity into what you're providing to your customers, your users, et cetera? And this is why that AI literacy we keep talking about is so crucial. The people in these at-risk roles who learn to work effectively with AI will be the ones who thrive.
And for our listeners, especially if you're in one of these industries or roles that Microsoft has mentioned, you don't need to panic. Think of it as a cause for actions.
Mm-hmm.
So this week's AI Gone Wrong segment is a double feature on
Ooh la
OpenAI.
la.
Yeah, they've had quite the week, and it really illustrates, as Kyle referenced earlier, why you need to be extremely careful about what information you're sharing with your AI tools.
Yeah, we've talked pretty frequently about how ChatGPT isn't a secure environment, especially for sensitive business information. And this week we got some pretty stark reminders of why those warnings matter.
So the first story is a warning that came directly from Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI. In a recent interview, he warned that there's no legal confidentiality when using ChatGPT as a therapist, which is something that we've talked a lot about. Please don't do this. Or for any kind of sensitive personal conversations, which I think also could imply for sensitive business conversations as well.
Yeah, what's particularly striking is that this is coming from the CEO of the company. Usually, companies downplay privacy concerns or give vague reassurances. But Altman is being refreshingly honest about the limitations of what they can promise in terms of confidentiality. It's what we've been telling our listeners for weeks. It's validated here by the CEO. But I think it's a really great step to see a little bit more transparency in these systems.
It feels like he's being like he has to say these because with some of the legal battles
Yeah.
that they're facing.
Well, and they're under a ton of scrutiny.
Yeah,
Everyone is watching what ChatGPT does.
yeah, exactly. And we've consistently said don't put sensitive business information into ChatGPT, and this is essentially Sam Altman confirming that stance. He's basically telling you that anything that you put into ChatGPT could potentially be accessed by OpenAI, by law enforcement, by other third parties. So just be very conscious of that.
So if there's no legal confidentiality protection, that means sensitive business information could potentially be subpoenaed or accessed in ways that most business owners probably haven't considered.
And this actually leads really nicely into our second OpenAI slash ChatGPT
Mm-hmm.
story of the week. Even when companies have good intentions and they claim to have strong privacy policies, technical failures can often expose your
Mm-hmm.
information in a way that nobody anticipated. This kind of happened a couple months back with Meta's AI. So
Mm-hmm.
why don't you tell us what's happened with ChatGPT?
Yeah, that's right. Very similar to the Meta story, but OpenAI had to remove a ChatGPT feature that allowed you to share a conversation. So what happened is these private conversations started leaking to Google search results once you clicked on the share button. And I mean, I would say this is every business owner's nightmare, but I think it's every person's nightmare. And it's exactly the kind of thing we've been warning about. Now, granted, I don't even think we thought it would get to this, but if you start putting sensitive information into systems that weren't designed for business critical data or for your therapy sessions, and you share them, they could get leaked.
ChatGPT had a feature that allowed users to share conversations publicly, which is exactly what the Meta issue was as well. I don't understand who thought that that feature is something that people wanted because I just don't think that people
Yeah.
do. But Anyway, but basically there was a bug in the system that made some private conversations indexable by Google's search crawlers, which essentially means it can appear in Google
Hmm.
search results. So conversations that users thought were private were actually being found and indexed by search engines, which meant that you could search for something and it would pop up on Google.
Hmm. And obviously, the scary part is that you had no idea this was happening. So people were just using ChatGPT normally, thinking their conversations were private, while those conversations were being discovered by anyone doing the right Google search.
And it's fixed the issue. Like we have to give them credit. Once it was
Hmm.
discovered, OpenAI fixed the issue and removed the feature. But the damage has kind of been done. And a lot of private conversations were already indexed by Google, and there's no easy way to completely remove that information from the search results once it's
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, a stark reminder that once it's on the internet, it's out there forever. But so now we have two big data risks: legal exposure and technical failure. And together they prove one really important thing, which is AI systems must be treated like any other third party tool with risk. These AI systems should be subject to the same internal risk and compliance standards as all other platforms.
We always tell our listeners to implement the New York Times test. So essentially, if you wouldn't be comfortable with
Mhm.
information ending up in the New York Times, you probably shouldn't be putting it into ChatGPT. But I think both of these stories really just drive home that anything you say could end up in either on Google or in a courtroom.
Mhm. Again, going back to our ChatGPT agent, I wasn't comfortable connecting my email, and based on all these stories, I'm even less so.
Yeah, perfect example. And it really goes to show why the minimum viable AI policy that we talk about with Sean is so crucial, because you need
Mhm.
really clear guidelines so that your team knows what information can and can't be shared with it with its your AI tools, and why everyone on your team needs to understand these boundaries.
So the bottom line, if you're using AI for business purposes, treat it like any other third-party service where you need to carefully consider what information you're sharing and what the potential risks are if that information becomes public. Altman's warning and this technical failure are both wake-up calls that validate a lot of what we've been telling everyone. Be cautious with sensitive data in these systems.
Okay, so that was a lot of information. Let's give our listeners some quick wins that they can implement this week.
Yeah, if you haven't done it already, we've been harping on this. Do the Chat GPT audit that we keep talking about. So spend 15 minutes this week asking everyone on your team what they've put into Chat GPT in the last month. After hearing about conversations leaking to Google searches and Sam Altman's warning about legal confidentiality, you need to know what information might already be out there.
Quick win number two, if you are in one of those roles that Microsoft flagged as AI transformables, don't panic, but do start experimenting. As we're always saying, pick one task every week and see if you can automate that. And the goal isn't to replace yourself, but it's to free up your time to focus on higher value work that really requires that human element.
Yep. And quick win number three. Based on our ChatGPT agent testing, if you want to experiment with agents, start simple and set realistic expectations. Use them for research or first drafts, tasks where 80% accuracy is acceptable and you don't have time to review it. But do not try to automate anything time sensitive or mission critical yet. So let's bring this all together. This week, we've seen both the promise and the peril of AI. Our ChatGPT agent experiment showed what's possible when you use these tools strategically, but also highlighted how far we still have to go before they're going to be truly reliable for business critical tasks.
So the moral of the story is, don't dismiss AI agents because they're not perfect yet, but also don't depend on them for anything critical. Use this time to build your AI literacy, understand your workflows, and prepare for when the technology catches up to the promise.
Thanks for listening to Early Adopter, where we help make AI your unfair advantage. If this episode helped clarify the current state of AI agents and how to navigate the privacy landscape safely, please share it with another founder or entrepreneur. Help us grow our community. And don't forget to follow us on social media at early_adopter without the E. And we're everywhere: Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube.
So until next time, keep innovating responsibly, stay curious, and remember, AI is your unfair advantage, but only if you use it wisely and understand its current limitations.
Absolutely. See you next week, Jess.
See you next week, Kyle.